Hey guys, this is JoINrbs here, and today I'm going to be talking about mid-game gunners in Long War 2. I think that in the early game, gunners struggle to really output damage. They try to get by with frag grenades pretty much. They don't have the greatest aim. They don't get range bonuses on their cannon that are anywhere near comparable to what like an assault rifle or a shotgun can pick up. Their cooldowns don't deal great damage, really. You could try taking Hail of Bullets at Sergeant, but it's mediocre. And so there are lots of reasons why gunners aren't so great in the early game at killing stuff, and they're pretty good at like suppressing things in the early game. In mid-game, they don't pick up anything to really improve their ability to suppress, and at the same time, enemies are becoming much more dangerous. So I think they get a little bit worse in breakdown situations, but a little bit better in alpha striking situations because they pick up a lot of perks which deal good damage to enemies. And there is a lot of customization available in the gunner tree. There are lots of medium to high power perks here, and a lot of them sort of do similar things, and so you can pick and choose where you're going to get the effects from based on exactly what you need at a certain point in a campaign. More about that in a bit. But in general, a 5 out of 10 for alpha strike potential. Gunners are quite average at, killing enemies as they walk into XCOM, and then when XCOM gets a turn before the enemies can do anything themselves. And a 6 out of 10 for breakdowns. Gunners are a little bit above average in situations where enemies are sort of getting out of control and doing fancy stuff just because of the strength of area suppression. Even though in general, I'm not taking perks that improve area suppression. Gunners are, pretty good at doing that, for sure. I said in the early game video that I take like 5 out of 6 of the perks at Lance Corporal and Corporal. I typically just take Shredder at Sergeant, but I may have taken Hail of Bullets. I may even have taken Mayhem if I'm feeling really weird. And so talking about mid-game gunners isn't going to be quite as clear as talking about mid-game for other classes because there are so many different builds that I think are reasonable to arrive at mid-game with. And it's also complicated by the fact that a lot of the perks that you can pick up through the mid and early late game sort of do the same thing. So like Chain Shot, Cyclic Fire, and Rapid Fire, every single one of those is a turn-ending damage ability. And you don't really need 3 turn-ending damage abilities. Like, what does that really do for you? Not a whole lot. You probably need 1, maybe 2, to like work your way around cooldowns on them. But taking all 3 of those would be sort of crazy. And so then you're wondering, like, which one shouldn't I take? Exactly. Cyclic Fire is the most awkward of them, but also the most powerful. Chain Shot and Rapid Fire are fairly comparable, with Chain Shot coming much earlier in the tree. Rapid Fire is a little bit more reliable, depending on the exact situation. It depends, is the answer. And so as we talk about these perks, I'm going to be saying, like, it depends quite a lot. Let's look at these Staff Sergeant perks, though, and I will try to impart some knowledge as much as I can. At Staff Sergeant, we're picking between Chain Shot, Iron Curtain, and Demolition. And Chain Shot is a fairly straightforward perk to talk about, I think. You take an opening shot with an aim penalty of -10, and assuming you don't miss it, so grazing is fine. Assuming that you don't miss it outright, you get to take another shot at the same target, assuming that the other target's still alive as well. Chain Shot's a very, very, very powerful ability. It's a double shot ability. It's usually pretty hard to miss targets that you care about chain shotting at this point in the campaign. You're not really, like, if there's an enemy Advent Trooper with tactical sense and heavy cover or something, that's not really an enemy you're trying to kill with bullets in general anyway. So Chain Shot would be terrible against that enemy because you just miss the first shot almost all the time and then don't even take the second shot. But that's sort of not relevant because you're going to like throw an incendiary grenade at it or something like that and it will die that way. Chain Shot's very, very good against mechs. It's extremely good, in fact, against mechs. It's fairly good against uncovered enemies like mutons, but not really amazing. When I look at Chain Shot, I just like a little montage goes off in my head of all the times that I've used Chain Shot against a mech, and that's basically what I have to say about the ability. Very, very strong against mechs. There aren't that many situations where it's that exciting against other enemies just because there are other ways to deal with them, or they're in cover, so it doesn't work so hot against them. But there are so many mechs in this game, and you'll use it against other enemies sometimes. You'll use it to kill a chrysalid outright or something like that. But I gave it an 8 out of 10 for alpha striking, a 5 out of 10 for breakdowns. I think it's actually, in terms of damaging perks, it's pretty relatively good in breakdowns. Gunners really like to shoot at things that are like 5 to 7 tiles away from them. That's where their aim bonuses work the best, and they don't get great aim bonuses, but you're typically going to run into that sort of range in a breakdown. And Chain Shot's going to be really nice to... you basically get to roll to try to deal double damage to something, which is really nice in a breakdown, because in a breakdown, almost killing something really sucks in a breakdown. It's often just about as bad as not dealing any damage to it at all. So the fact that Chain Shot has this added variance where if you miss the first shot, the second shot doesn't go off at all, doesn't matter as much if you're shooting it against something that you have to hit twice to kill anyway, because hitting it once wouldn't do very much for you. So Chain Shot's cool. You can take Chain Shot here, for sure. Iron Curtain, I rated 4 out of 10 for alpha striking, 4 out of 10 for breakdowns. That might be a little bit harsh on it. Maybe it's 5 out of 10s for both. I don't know. It's a big cone attack. It will roll to hit enemies, and if it hits them, it deals half damage to them and reduces their mobility. Note that we have shredder ammo on this tree. We also have a gun with fairly high base damage, and so half damage is still a decent amount, and shredder ammo is potentially very valuable if we're aimed at a pod of 6 mechs or something like that. Apparently mechs are going to be a theme when talking about these gunner perks. Yeah, we're going to mention those with Cyclic Fire too, for sure. Anyway, Iron Curtain's like, okay. It's fairly powerful... Notice the soldier doesn't have a torso. It's weird. It's a fairly powerful opening ability. Cone attacks generally are fairly powerful opening abilities because you can get an entire pod in the area of effect. I'm sort of loath to take a perk because of its power as an opening ability. This one's really good because it will remove the mobility of the pod, so it will struggle for like bio units in it to scamper to cover, which is a very nice thing to be able to do to a pod. But is it really that much better than a sting grenade, a flamethrower, even a shredder gun from an exosuit, which you don't have to spend a perk on? I wouldn't say that it really stands out, and it will be obsoleted by something like Street Sweeper or Saturation Fire later in the campaign if you really do want a cone attack. So in general, I avoid Iron Curtain. I just think that it's a redundant perk in a lot of ways, which doesn't even do what it's doing as well as other things can. I think the simplest explanation of why I don't like Iron Curtain very much is that you can just build an exosuit and put it on a soldier and they will have a cone attack, which is like comparable to better than Iron Curtain and doesn't cost them a perk, and your gunner gets to have a different perk. And the other perks at this level are pretty good. So while I understand the allure of Iron Curtain and cone attacks are definitely good, I don't think you need this one. I think you can get them better places, and generally would advise against. Demolition destroys a target's cover, and Demolition's quite reliable. It will pretty consistently destroy cover that is facing you when you use Demolition on an enemy, and that can do a lot of different cool things. You can use it on a car, for example, and it will blow up the car. And if there are multiple enemies on the car, that can deal a lot of damage. Or you can use it on cover of a bio enemy so that people can flank and shoot it. There's not actually very many things. I guess it's a pretty straightforward perk. Demolition's actually my go-to at Staff Sergeant for gunners. Like I said earlier, I don't think we need Chain Shot, Cyclic Fire, and Rapid Fire all to get picked. Actually, I just noticed there's actually Rupture at the Gunnery Sergeant tier as well, so that's a 4th turn ending, do extra damage perk with a cooldown. Yeah, we don't need all of those. And Demolition does a very unique thing, which is hard to replace. It is on a long cooldown. I believe it's a 5-turn cooldown, 4-turn cooldown. It does require a lot of ammo, so you'll have to probably reload and then use it in a turn, which means you're often unable to move in Demolition. Even though it's only a 1-action ability, you're likely starting your turn with too few ammo in your guns. You'd need to have an auto reload, or you'd have to sort of have planned ahead in order to have enough ammo to move in Demolition. But Demolition solves some nice problems for you in the mid-game. Quite often in the mid-game, you are having a little bit of difficulty killing an enemy in heavy cover a good distance away from you on guerrilla operations. This is a very specific situation, but it's one that comes up quite a lot. If there's an enemy who sort of pulled backward into a nice heavy cover tile, and you don't have Sapper on your Grenadier, or the cover tile isn't something that will die to Sapper, and you don't have a technical rocket handy, you're quickly running out of ways to actually kill that enemy. You can incendiary grenade it, but you may not have a Grenadier, and your other soldiers may not have range with their incendiary grenades, or you can run at it. And other than that, you're looking at like blowing up its cover with a technicals rocket, or using AoE consumables, like multiple AoE consumables on one enemy, or things like that. So Demolition is actually a very unique solution to a common and unique problem. Although it's not the most powerful perk in the world, there isn't really another straightforward solution to that situation. Like, honestly, there just isn't, and it comes up all the time. I'm trying to think if I'm like missing something, but not really. Very often, if enemies are pulled in heavy cover a long way or away from you, and your squad isn't like armed to the teeth with sharpshooters and everything all going on, the only reasonable way to kill them without using a trillion consumables is going to be Demolition. And so I really like this perk. I rated it 6 out of 10 for alpha and 6 out of 10 for breakdown. It's a very specific power. Like I just said, it's very specifically for the situation where you have that one enemy who's quite a long way away in heavy cover. But it's a very, very, very useful ability. And Demolition is sort of a cornerstone of what I use gunners for on my missions. Gunner can enable you to really operate at mid to long range in otherwise awkward situations because of this perk. So I like Demolition. Seal of approval for sure. You can also definitely take Chain Shot here. Chain Shot is very nice, and if you want some extra damage against mechs specifically, that's something you can go for. Keep in mind that you do have to kill like bio soldiers who are in heavy cover a good way away from you in this game, and you're gonna have to come up with some other way to do that if you're not taking Demolition. But maybe you'll just suppress them and deal with it, or maybe you have lots of incendiary grenades and Grenadiers or something like that. There are probably some other ways to enable it. At Tech Sergeant, we're picking between Cyclic Fire, Danger Zone, and Cool Under Pressure. And these are 3 extremely powerful abilities, and none of them really lines up with any of the others. So what you pick here becomes a question of what you think is important in a campaign, almost as much as how good you think the abilities are, because they're all really good. We'll talk about Cyclic Fire first. I gave this a 9 out of 10 for alpha and a 4 out of 10 for breakdowns. You can't move in Cyclic Fire unless you're going to like use a command on your gunner. And so it's a stationary, awkward perk, which will nevertheless very commonly just blow things up. It's very useful against enemies who like to just stand out of cover in front of you, stuff like mechs, archons, sectopods, gatekeepers. You have shredder ammo on your gunner, so just throwing 3 shots at those enemies, the heavily armored ones especially, is going to do some good things for you. It has a it has a 4-turn cooldown, and is it like 5 ammo, or does it use all of your ammo? It uses lots of ammo. It uses 5 ammo. So you will get this back off cooldown on the like late game massive fight sorts of missions where you might want to use it twice. And the way that you're going to use it on guerrilla operations is probably to identify the most dangerous enemy on the map. It might be a tier 3 muton, or it might be an archon or a sectopod or something like that, and you just cyclic fire them. It's not the most amazing ability for dealing with biotroopers. It's a little bit of overkill against mechs quite often, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but like if we're picking between chain shot, cyclic fire, rapid fire, and rupture, you probably can get away with rapid fire or chain shot to kill most of the mechs in the game with your gunner. And those are both probably actually a little bit more serviceable because you're able to move and shoot. So cyclic fire is very good. It deals a lot of damage. I like the perk a lot. You don't have to take it here, but you certainly can. Danger Zone I gave a 5 out of 10 for alpha and a 5 out of 10 for breakdowns. It's a very difficult perk to really evaluate. All of the confusion that I have over what exactly area suppression actually does in this game comes into play when you're looking at area suppression, which or danger zone rather, which makes area suppression suppress in a 5-tile radius instead of a 4-tile radius. Going from 4 to 5 doesn't sound like a big difference, but keep in mind that it is a circle, and so you're adding a considerable amount of area, pi r squared, and all that. It does hit many more tiles when you add 1 more tile to the radius. And this radius, not diameter, so you're adding actually 2 to all sides. Whatever. The question with Danger Zone is again, like, what does area suppression actually do? And it's always a difficult question. If you're going for like area suppression plus Overwatch builds, you can probably go Grazing Fire, Lockdown, Mayhem, Chain Shot, Danger Zone, or something like that on your gunner, and have a soldier who's very, very powerful. A problem with relying on suppression in Overwatches to do stuff like that is that suppression only removes 15 aim from enemies. It will remove their ability to use some of their scarier abilities, but it will also remove their ability to use some of their less scary abilities and leave them with basically only the ability to shoot. And so if you're relying on suppression as real crowd control, you're going to get shot at quite a lot. I'm sort of talking around the fact that like I can't really give this a real evaluation. If you're going on a lot of missions where suppression seems valuable and you're building soldiers who work well with suppression, people who can throw flashbangs, people who have Overwatch abilities to sort of double up on the gunners suppressing fire, then you could go for some sort of suppression build, and I think you could win the campaign with that strategy probably. But I don't think that it's generally going to be the strongest way to set your squad up. I think that going for alpha striking sort of builds on your squad is generally going to be better, while looking for cheap ways to deal with enemies when they fail to be alpha striked. And suppression just sort of works perpendicularly to that strategy instead of in parallel with it. So I typically give Danger Zone a pass, but you can definitely make that a strategy if you want to. Yeah. And Cool Under Pressure, I gave a 7 out of 10 for alpha and a 4 out of 10 for breakdown play. It's weird because it's a very good perk to pair with suppression, but it's probably the second best suppression perk at this tier. So if you're actually building a suppression gunner, I think you'd almost always value Danger Zone over Cool Under Pressure. Because I think if you're building a suppression gunner, you're going to want to have support for that gunner in Overwatch soldiers, and they'll do the damage for the most part. And the suppression is largely about turning off the really scary abilities and controlling areas of space. Cool Under Pressure is a really nice ability because it makes your Overwatch fire against incoming pods better. And it's really easy to look at this soldier and think, oh, area suppression, big crowd control, AoE soldier, yay, cool. But it's really important to remember that when you play a Long War II campaign, almost all of the pods you'll ever fight have 4 or fewer enemies in them. You're going to run into some pods of 8 here and there, a couple of pods of 6 probably. But by and large, pods are going to have 1 to 4 enemies in them. And if you're engineering situations well for yourself, by and large, they're going to walk into you, and you're going to have soldiers on Overwatch waiting for them. And so stacking up soldiers who can deal good damage on Overwatch as a pod patrols into you is actually just very, very valuable in a way where like that value is just repetitive and always extremely good. And I think that taking Cool Under Pressure here is completely fine at Tech Sergeant. Yeah, Cyclic Fire is the big showy woo perk, but it's very hard to overestimate how much value you're going to get out of Cool Under Pressure in a campaign where you're playing well, seeing where pods are coming from, and ready for them as they walk in. It's a little bit of a binary perk because it doesn't do that much for you in situations where the pod gets in while you're not on Overwatch. But gunners do still have suppression, and so Cool Under Pressure does have that backup value of being able to be used with suppression. Somebody in the comments on the early game gunners video, Aldo, I think, pointed out that you can put together area suppression plus Roust as an alpha strike combo. Roust is a Lance Corporal technical perk, and in the early game, that's not really ever going to be worth doing. It's just weird, and then like your gunner is going to miss most of the time, and Roust will fail to set fire, and you could have just flamethrowered them probably, and it would have been better. But getting into late game, putting together a combo like that with area suppression and Cool Under Pressure, now that your gunner has a bigger gun and can crit on Overwatch, and you probably have found an elite expanded magazine, so you're getting to shoot more times with the suppression and stuff like that, it's a real thing to consider. So I think you can take Cyclic Fire or Cool Under Pressure here, and I'd be pretty satisfied with either. If I was really having trouble dealing damage to the high hit point enemies in a campaign that was stretching into, this is getting into late mid game toward early end game, I would tend towards Cyclic Fire for sure. But if I had good strategic control of a campaign and was still able to do fairly easy missions, rinse and repeat sort of stuff, I think Cool Under Pressure is going to be a very nice perk to pick up to prevent you from taking wounds in just sort of messy ways and smooth out your variance. If you're going to pick based on stats, which is something I do sometimes, if I want to have a bit of both on my roster, I'll look at stats to try to decide which soldier is building which way. I would tend more toward Cool Under Pressure on high mobility gunners, because your low mobility gunners are probably going to be trying to dash to keep up with your other soldiers on timed missions. So this gunner has 16 mobility, and he'd be a decent one to pick up Cool Under Pressure on, in my opinion. And I'd put Cyclic Fire on lower mobility gunners, especially since they can't move and use it usually anyway. I'll take Cool Under Pressure this time, just to throw it on the perk tree so that it's real. I feel like I feel like very few people would build a gunner like this. And I mean, there are other ways you can build a gunner which I wouldn't think were terrible, but I think this is a very specific gunner build which is constantly identifying ways in which a gunner can produce unique value for my team, because I want my gunner to have some value that's different from what my other soldiers can do, and I already have other soldiers which can like kill mechs or shoot twice in a turn or whatever, crowd control enemies. And so this is making the gunner able to cumulatively add to my squad's Overwatch ability in a really nice way, which is, I think, a very valuable thing to be putting together. I think if you've never played with Overwatch soldiers, you might be amazed to find out how much easier the game gets when you're just getting lots of good Overwatch shots against positive 3 and 4 when they pull into you. Has demolition for the very specific situation where enemies are in cover a long way away from you. Has shredder to apply good shred to armored targets. I will be taking rapid fire, probably a gunnery sergeant, so the gunner will end up being able to deal good single target damage, but we've delayed it a lot because I think that demolition and cool under pressure are actually both more valuable than like kill zone, which is the alternative at gunnery sergeant. Anyway, that's a build, all right? So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I hope that this is at least presenting a unique way to build gunners, which I hope I'm supporting well, so you understand why I'm making these decisions. But I do feel like they look very weird, and I'm obviously passing up some extremely powerful perks for very specific solutions to problems that I identify as being things to care about in Legend Iron Man. So if you're a Legend Iron Man player, I'd be interested if you find the same problems exist and think these are good solutions. And I'll see you guys next time for late game gunners. Thanks so much for watching.